Hello, everyone. This is Ted Schmidt from Action Coach Northwest, and this is another edition of our Action Coach Northwest podcast serving the greater Spokane business community. And today, our guest is Mark Norton. He is the Executive Director of the Northwest I-90 Manufacturing Alliance. Excuse me. So welcome, Mark. Thank you for being part of our podcast today.
Well, thanks for having me, Ted. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, we're going to get right into the questions here and get some words of wisdom and some knowledge and share that with the business community here in Spokane. So question number one is, if you had to start from square one in business, what would you do differently?
I think for me, Ted, um, I would probably try to resource other people and make connections earlier with mentors. I think that's really important. And also just peers. Groups, industry groups, which of course I head up, are great because you get to meet with other owners and talk and share problems and sometimes share solutions, which is obviously helpful. And
Mhm.
I think it's important for owners to try and managers to try and realize they can't do everything and they can't have expertise in every area. And so it's really critical to surround yourself with a network of people that can help kind of fill in those gaps. And even if you're pretty competent in a number of areas, you just don't have the time to do everything. So it's important to have those resources. And I think that would be probably a key piece of advice that I would share with people.
Yeah, great advice. Great advice. I see that all the time. You get
Yeah.
overwhelmed and yeah, awesome. Okay, so next question. What have your biggest learnings been as an employer since you began in business?
Wow, that's a good one. Um, I think as an employer, and I've done a lot of work, we do a lot of work in our group with workforce development. So there's a lot of focus and learning around kind of dynamics about how you train people, retain people, business culture, all those things. Um, and I think some of the two things I think are super important. One is your culture, and I think one of the lessons of COVID, a lot of people lost people and struggled to retain workers. And so I think having a good business culture, and to me, that's allowing input, giving your employees ownership in the processes, sharing as much information as you can. I've worked for some companies in my career that had largely an open book about their operations, and that's a little scary, I think, for some owners.
Mm,
But you'd be surprised by how often employees will like look at that and they start looking at what you're spending on power and benefits and all that. And it kind of changes that perception employees have. Well, the
oh
owner's
yeah.
making all this money, right? And when they start to see and they look at that P&L, as much as you feel comfortable disclosing, they go, holy cow. And a lot of them will start taking ownership and they'll make suggestions on a way to save costs and things like that. So that's one area I think really is important. I think it's important to invest in training of your people. One of the initiatives I've been involved with, Whitworth has just debuted a manufacturing institute that they're going to be offering around manufacturing, which of course is primarily where I play. And it's really on upskilling your your people. And when I think of that manufacturing, I think of that guy that maybe they're a great machine operator and you see talent and you see potential there and you want them to advance, in your organization. But we make an assumption. We make an assumption because they're good at what they do, they'll be a good leader and a
Mm.
good manager, right? Which you and I know it's not at all the case. There's certainly a certain natural gift that people can have, but there's a whole set of skills. And too often we just bump those people or we make our best sales guy or sales manager or whatever.
Yeah,
Have you seen that, right?
that's the classic one. Yeah.
Yeah. And they flame out. They don't have the right skill set, even though they're very good at what they do. And in a case like that, sometimes you not only do they not succeed, but then they quit. And now you not only don't have a sales manager, you don't have your best sales guy with you anymore.
Right. Right. Excellent. Yeah. No, great points. Great points. Okay. What are some common misconceptions about running a business and how do you address them?
I, boy, that's a pretty broad question. I would say um, one is to be very aware that you don't go into business and figure that it's only a 40-hour week commitment. And it's really important to understand how much time you're going to put in. And I think we don't talk about it a lot, but that's a buy-in from your stakeholders, and that's your personal stakeholders, your family, your friends, and for them to understand, that this is going to hurt your availability. You're not always, going to be around. And I think it's really important to get that sorted out because you don't want trouble on that end distracting you when you're starting to get your business going.
Yeah.
I think the other piece, Ted, that's big is most people underestimate how much money they need to start up. I don't know if you've seen that, but typically they're
Mhm.
undercapitalized. So, when you put your business plan together, don't be conservative, plan for worst case. Um, and this is kind of where that networking piece comes in. Look for resources. There's a lot of them around funding, grants from SBA, your regional economic development people like Greater Spokane or the chambers around here have
Mhm.
resources. The state has resources. Make sure you give yourself an opportunity to be successful, and that if you have a downturn or some unexpected expense, that you're not immediately stressing because you don't have enough cash on hand. So from
Yeah.
a functional
Well,
standpoint, right?
yeah, you run out of cash, you're out of business, right? And that's,
Yeah.
yeah, I do see that a lot, with especially, smaller, startup type stuff where they just don't have enough capital to get going. And then they try to do things, kind of, uh, you know, duct tape and baling wire type stuff and band-aids,
Yeah.
and it doesn't work very well. So it can really, yeah, that's a key point, very key point. So, okay, what do you attribute your growth to?
I think kind of a hallmark for me in my career, both in this role with a nonprofit and in private industry, was I always was very focused on collaboration and networking. I did a number of projects in the medical device world where we would have maybe 7, 8 companies working together on a project, and I
Mhm.
was kind of the connector and convener, that
Sure.
brought them together and kept things on track. And I think that for me, and everybody's different, but that was kind of my gift to build relationships and get people to trust each other and work together. And when you have those projects and they go well, and you have success and you get something really cool accomplished, it's just such a great feeling. I worked on some of the first generation blood glucose monitoring and insulin delivery systems back in
Hmm.
the 80s, and back then there wasn't anything like that. And brittle diabetics, it was just, if you know anybody who's got diabetes, severe diabetes, uh, their quality of life was not much fun.
No.
And to be part of that, and I talked with some of the people that tested those devices initially when we got them first started, and just their gratitude and how it had been so transformative for their daily life.
Yeah.
That was such a neat feeling. And same thing now, we're working collaboratively on projects, everything from AI manufacturing to new materials in aerospace that will, reduce emissions and increase economies. Um, and none of those can be done by one company. They have to be collaborative. And
Yeah.
so I guess I can't take any credit. That was just part of my DNA that I
Right.
like doing that, getting people to work together. So
Well, it's awesome when you get those experiences where you really impact people's lives in a positive way, and it makes a difference, and that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah,
Kind of,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, what do you do? How do you balance your personal life with the demands of running a business or an organization in your case?
Boy, I think that's one we all struggle with in a leadership role. I think I think it's just, you really have to be clear with your boundaries in your personal and business life. And where there's all times that we have to make an exception to that rule, right? But it gets easy to just start doing that and then do it again. And the next thing you know, you've eroded those boundaries. And now, you've got trouble at home or in other relationships. And gosh, it's hard enough to do what we do without, having that to distract us. And
Yeah,
I think it's important to communicate to your key partners on that too. Here's the times I'm available. This is kind of like only call me if it's a 5 alarm fire at these times. And it was something we all struggle with, and it comes and goes. And I think one way to do that I found is try and look at those times where you have natural breaks in your schedule, whether it be holidays or things, and really plan around those so you can take advantage of those to get a little bit more work-life balance. But I haven't figured it out 100% by any means. Full
yeah,
disclosure.
we all have that problem. It's kind of like being like an entrepreneur or a business owner or executive. It's a lifestyle. I mean, it's not a job; it's a lifestyle. So you gotta, yeah, I see that all the time. Where you have to incorporate it, and it has to work. So, okay, what qualities do you look for in employees, and how do you foster a positive and productive work environment?
So it's interesting, I'm fortunate enough in what I do. I talk to a lot of companies, a lot of managers everywhere, from people, running production cells on a factory floor to, of course, CEOs, other business development executives, and so forth. Uh, what I hear a lot is we want aptitude and we want attitude. And that is, first off, do they have a natural ability, talent for this particular role that we're looking at? In manufacturing, that's can be very specific. Are they mechanically oriented? If you're looking for a role on production floor, um, are they somebody that has natural people skills? If you're looking for a sales or business development person, right? And we all know you can work on a lot of things, but natural ability, you can't teach that. People have it or they don't. And so I'm inclined to look for that. And I'll take somebody that's maybe not doesn't have as much experience, but has a real both an ability and a passion for that role. Because over the long haul, excuse me, over the long haul, they're really going, to excel. And then the other part is the ability, which is part of that, or excuse me, the attitude, which is wanting to work, wanting to learn, not having an ego that's defensive, that they can take constructive input and criticism, and they have kind of that learner's mind. And
Yeah.
so I don't look as much at the resume, I guess, honestly, Ted, as I do at the person.
Hmm.
And because you can teach skills, you can teach specifics, but I think, a passion for what they do and an innate ability are two things you can't teach.
Yeah. And do you find that that's really important to the culture of the business as well when you hire
Oh,
people?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it's the same with leaders, even your leaders, kind of mid-management people, right? People who are innately kind of people and good people skills. I don't know what your experience has been, but mine certainly, those people tend to be pretty successful in those
Yeah.
roles.
Yeah.
And sometimes you look at, like, you want somebody to run an engineering department, you take your best, this is kind of like the sales analogy we talked earlier. Take your best engineer and make them head the group, and everybody's miserable because that's not their gift.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of my experience.
Yeah. Aptitude and attitude. I like that. I like that. All right. Wow, we're sailing through. Second to last question, believe it or not. What question should I be asking you that I haven't?
Wow, that's a good question. So one thing that I try and um, in my other practice of consulting that I look at is how do you plan long-term business strategy? And that's an area I work on with companies. And I find too often, and Ted, I know you see this in what you do, people tend to be pulled by the opportunity of the moment as far as what direction their company goes, right? Tends to be
Mhm.
short term. I like to approach it first, and I look inward first. I say, what are we really good at? Or if in my customer's case, what are you really good at doing? You can pivot, you can learn things, but if you already have a kind of a sphere of excellence, then how do you capitalize on that for a competitive advantage? And then you take a look, okay, what markets does that fit in? And I can give you a really kind of an actual, kind of a little bit of a story example on that. There's a company here, manufacturing company, and back in the 80s when I went to work for them, at that time, the lottery business was just starting to blow up. It's hard for a lot of people to believe. We didn't have lotteries at one point, but it started to come out. This company was doing display work, and the business sold. And the owner was kind of the creative guy, the visionary guy that could think of new stuff and cool stuff, right? And there were two factors at play. So one was being first, that guy left. So now you have the manufacturing, but you don't really have that creative person who could figure out where the next kind of opportunity is. And this was point of sale displays is what they were doing. And at the same time, that market initially there was tons of opportunity everywhere. And then it became to get very competitive. And the model moved from kind of a project situation to a bid situation to the level where even if you designed a part and designed a display for somebody, it would go out for public bid,
Mhm. Wow.
right? Which obviously that's not a very good business situation. So I looked at our company. I said, what are we really good at? And I said, we're really good at technical execution. We're really good in quality. We're really good in engineering support. And then, the next thing you look at, okay, that's our strengths. What markets does that have the highest value in? And the first one I looked at was medical and then aerospace. And we already had a guy working in
Mm.
aerospace. They were starting to get some traction. But I went down to a company here in the Northwest. It was a major manufacturer in the dental industry and started talking to them. And it was one of those serendipity things where they just happened to have one of their major suppliers in trouble and struggling. Because this was a company that very seldom switched suppliers. They were super loyal to their vendor base. Anyway, the long and short of it was that conversation within 3 months, we had an annual contract for the next 3 years for, I think, even back in the 80s, was probably north of $200,000 a year. And that was largely just kind of saying, where do we fit? And then we followed that kind of philosophy and built a pretty successful business in that sector of manufacturing that we were in. But it
Yeah.
was really, it again comes down, where do we add the most value? Well, point of sale display, commodity markets, those types of things. If you're a higher end, and I'm advanced manufacturing is where I focus. If you're a higher end manufacturer, those people don't want to pay for that. So what markets do? And that's where you fit. And
Yeah.
then you build your whole strategy around that, from identifying prospects to your marketing and branding and all that.
Yeah. I
That
love
makes
that.
sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. It's just, focus on your strengths and then go find your niche that fits those strengths,
Yes.
right into it. Yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
excellent.
Seems common sense, right? But a lot of
Yeah.
companies, as you know,
Yeah.
sometimes they're so busy with the day to day that they don't really
Yeah.
pull back and take a look at that. So,
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I love it. Okay. All right. Well, last question. Holy smokes. Okay. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And any words of advice for other business owners who are looking to grow their businesses?
well, I'll be 69 next year. But I love doing what I do. I don't really foresee retiring, maybe a little bit less of a thing in another 5 years, but I love what I do. And I think again, for owners, Ted, to probably loop back to our first part of our conversation
Mm-hmm.
about don't try and do everything, small business owners, right? And it's easy and you're strapped on resources. I'd encourage them to reach out to your local economic development groups, do a little sleuthing on the web, find industry groups and affiliations that you can join so you can start to build out your peer network. And I'm sure you tell this to your clients too, right? It's like you start building that network, and sometimes it's just having somebody who's in your shoes that knows what you're going through to give you feedback, right? You don't
Yeah.
necessarily have to be like a coach or a consultant, but just someone that you can say, hey, man, I'm struggling with this. And sometimes those people say, hey, I had the same problem. Here's how I fixed it. And boom, right?
Yeah.
So don't try and go it alone. I guess that's comes down to that for me.
Yeah. Don't go it alone, right?
Yeah. Or get a really good action coach to help you too.
Yeah, there you go. That's music to my ears, right? Well, mentors, you get mentors from everywhere. And
Yeah.
just, get somebody that can mentor you in a specific area, of need and stuff like that. So awesome. Well, great insights today, Mark. Thank you. Thank you to Mark Norton, Executive Director of the Northwest I-90 Manufacturing Alliance. Really appreciate your input today. And this will be
Thanks.
going out to the business community, and hopefully everybody's going to really enjoy your insights and your advice today. So thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, Ted. Really
You
appreciate
bet.
it.
Take care.
Take care.